Hello! Welcome to the Chirp YouTube channel. My name is Christy. I am your friendly online speech language pathologist and specialist in children's communication development. Of course, communication involves behavior because behavior is a type of communication. So we talk about behavior a lot here too. Today, I'm going to be talking about a particular type of behavior, and that is play. We are doing a series on play. You can find the rest of the videos in this series right in that playlist up there. Today, I'm going to be talking about one of the problems that can come up in the area of play, and that is rigidity. Rigidity is the opposite of flexibility. If you think about a baby tree, and you think about how flexible a baby tree is, when you plant a new tree in your backyard, you can bend that baby tree all the way to the ground, the tippy top of it, and it will not break. Trees need to be flexible in order to sway in the wind. If they are too rigid, they will snap off and they will not survive. It's a lot like this in our lives as well. In fact, insistence on sameness is one of the criteria for a diagnosis of an autism spectrum disorder. Therefore, if your child does have a diagnosis of autism, then flexibility is something that you're probably going to need to spend more time on to teach that skill, because it probably won't come very naturally to your child. If you're a teacher or a therapist, of course, you already know this, and you're probably looking for some additional creative ideas to work on this skill. As we've been discussing in this play series, one of the hallmarks of play is that it is flexible. A person simply lining up cars over and over and over and not allowing any changes to this routine doesn't really count as play because it is not flexible. It can't deal with any changes at all, and it never changes of its own accord. Play needs to be flexible. And as we've discussed, play is preparation, it's practice for real life. And as we all know, flexibility is a requirement for success in real life. Things are going to happen in our daily lives that are troublesome. Things are going to happen that we don't like. Perhaps dinner is 5 minutes late. Perhaps our friend doesn't come to our house when we expected him to. Or he comes over, but he doesn't want to play robots. He wants to play cars. Flexibility is required to handle these situations well and to stay regulated as we're dealing with things that happen that we don't prefer. Play is the perfect place to work on flexibility. And of course, there are other places in your daily lives where you're going to want to work on this. However, this video is going to consist of ideas related to play because that is the series that this video is part of. Step 1, observe the child's preferred play routine. Observe what the child is doing. What kind of scenery is there? I have picked 2 children out of my memory banks, and I'm going to be talking about their rigidity issues. So I will discuss their scenarios at the end. But think about the scenery in your child's preferred play environment. Think about the characters. Who is involved? Are there people? Only trains, only cars, only animals? Who is involved? And what are they doing? Think about the pace. How quickly do things happen? Is this a very speedy process? We move through this and then we do it again and then again? Or is it very slow and methodical? Then observe about the verbal script. Are there words? Are the characters talking to each other? If so, what's the script? Usually in rigid play routines, the script is very rigid as well. Nobody's allowed to say anything unless it's one of these phrases, and they have to come in exactly the right order, and they have to be right or you're out. So pay attention to the script. Right now, we're not doing anything. We are observing, we are learning and paying attention to what the child is doing and what the preferred routine is. Also, you should pay attention on this step. How much are other people allowed to participate? Are you allowed to be in the room? Are you allowed to sit next to the child while she's doing this routine? Are you allowed to comment on this routine? Are you allowed to have your character join the child's characters in this routine? Pay attention to these things. And when I say allowed, what I mean is, can you participate in those ways without the child becoming upset to the point where she can't play anymore, where she loses interest in the game because you have wrecked it for her? If she's able to carry on, even though you're doing those things, then you are allowed to do them. It does take some trial and error to figure that out. So give yourself some time, perhaps take some notes as you are doing this anthropological research. Now I will share with you the play scenarios of these two children that I'm thinking of. The first one is a boy. He was 4 at the time I started working with him. He just graduated from high school, if that tells you anything. And that was not the beginning of my career. He was a little bit down the line. So it's making me feel a little on the elderly side that I have students that I worked with when they were preschoolers and now they're grown-ups. It's crazy how that happens. But he was very rigid. This was the most easily upset child that I've ever met. And he did not have any particular diagnosis. He did not have a diagnosis of an autism spectrum disorder, as most of the kids I worked with at the time did. He was simply, he could not manage his behavior. He was upset by everything. Any change to routine, anything he didn't like, anything that happened that was not his preferred way of things happening would throw him into a huge meltdown, and he would be out of control for hours sometimes. So I was not really there to work on communication, talking, vocabulary, articulation, as much as I was to help him learn to manage himself. And he was one of my favorite clients, and I saw so much improvement from him from this process that I'm talking about with you today. This is what we need, and it needs to be slow and methodical. His play scenario was a Thomas the Tank Engine scenario, and I have talked about this child before in videos, so if you have watched all of my videos, you may have heard about him before. You may even have seen some video of him. The scenario was, I can't remember if it was Thomas or Edward or one of the other trains, but one of the trains, and it was all reenacted from a movie, one of the Thomas the Tank Engine videos. He would take a train, so there'd be an engine and then these other cars, and he would drive it on the tracks, but he had built the tracks in such a way that there was a mountain, a hill, and the tracks turned, but the train couldn't turn in time, and so the engine would be dangling off the cliff. I'm not doing a good job. Dangling off the cliff. And the other train wasn't strong enough, the rest of the train wasn't strong enough to pull him back up, so they had to call for assistance, and there was a very scripted way that all of this had to happen. And at the very beginning, I was not allowed to even be in the room. If I came in the room, he would go, "Wah!" and start melting down. It was very sensitive. He had a hair trigger. The other child I'm going to talk about is a little girl. She was, I think she was also 4 at the time I started seeing her. And she was not very interactive at the time. She really preferred to not interact with people. People are very hard to predict, and they are very hard to control. It's not very easy to make people do what you want. So it's very nice to keep other people out of your scenarios and have them all to yourself. So Her favorite way to play with the toy house that I brought over was to set all of the furniture up and put the people in the furniture exactly where she wanted them and adjust them all so that their knees and ankles were all at a right angle, so that their elbows were all at a right angle, so that all the chairs were just right around the table. And she would work on this for a half an hour, 45 minutes. If I had left her alone to it, I think she would have done this for hours, just trying to perfect exactly where she wanted the people. The people didn't interact with each other. The people didn't do anything. The dad didn't get up and put the children to bed, and the mom didn't get in the car and go to work. Nobody made meals. Nobody went for a walk or petted the dog. They all just sat there, frozen at their 90-degree angles. You can see why this kind of rigidity does not count as play in the way that we talked about play so far in this series. Those are the two scenarios that are in my head when I talk about rigidity. They're pretty extreme. Most children don't have this level of rigidity, but most children have some, and almost every child I've ever worked with on the autism spectrum has a significant amount, although most not to this level. And once again, one of these children didn't even have a diagnosis of an autism spectrum disorder. So rigidity is not just from one particular diagnosis. The next step, step 2, is to change one of these rules just a little bit. Do something that is not part of the script. Perhaps you introduce a new character. Perhaps you come in the room when before you weren't allowed in the room. Perhaps you change the scenery a little bit. Maybe there was only one mountain in Thomas's world and you made another one with some other train tracks or with a pillow. Obviously, I was not in a position right away to do any of these things with either of these two children. But there are more options coming. Change the pace. Perhaps you make things go a little faster or a little slower in the child's preferred routine. Perhaps you introduce new words or new phrases. Perhaps you sing a little song about what's happening. These are all good ways to change things up just slightly. Bend the rules a little bit. Continue to offer comments such as, my person thinks we should, or maybe we could. You're offering suggestions about other ways that this game could be fun. And this whole time, you're keeping your eye on the child. You can tell a child's getting worked up, getting upset, if their jaw is getting tense, if their arms and their legs are getting stiff, if they're clamping their teeth, if they start making a squealy noise, if they start growling, or the one little girl would get up and leave the room with the girl with the dollhouse. If I interfered too much, she would leave. She would completely disengage. It was too much for her. Whereas with this little boy with the trains, he would start going, he would go off like a siren if it was too much. Your job is to bend the rules while at the same time keeping one foot on the gas and one foot on the brakes. If the child's okay and you're doing something a little interfering, keep at it for a little bit and then back off. Then start up a little bit again. Offer another character. Put a boulder on the tracks. Bring another character into the toy house who wasn't there before and see what happens. But when the child starts ramping up those tension behaviors, back off and just watch for a while again. See if the child is able to calm him or herself down again. Can the kid get back to baseline? And then you can intervene a little bit more. And that is step 3, adjust. You're paying attention to the child's responses to your intervening, and you are adjusting your intervention in response. If the child is too upset, you back off. If the child doesn't notice, then you do something that's a little more intense, that's a little more against the rules that you saw at the beginning. The goal here is that the child is able to carry on playing, carry on enjoying this activity that he or she really likes. And you know that the child really likes it because this is the activity the child picks when given options. The child is able to continue doing this activity, but is a little bit uncomfortable. This is called the zone of proximal development. The ZPD sounds so fancy. And it's important in almost every area of our lives. We can't get any more intelligent or educated unless we're a little bit uncomfortable. But if we're too uncomfortable, we shut down or we cry or whatever our stress response is. It's the same with working out. If I go to the gym and I try to lift a 500-pound weight, I will cry and I will probably break something, pull a shoulder out of joint or something. But if I try to lift a 5-pound weight to start with, I'm going to be able to do it. And I'm going to get stronger as I do it so that I can lift a little bit more. That is how it works with learning as well. We have to stay in the right zone so that we don't push the child too hard, so that she just shuts down and leaves the room, so that he melts down and hates it when I come over because I made it so irritating for him. We don't want that. But we also don't want to just leave the child without helping him or her learn this important skill of flexibility. It's an important skill because we can't succeed in life if we are completely rigid. As I mentioned, neither of these two children could play. Neither of them could interact with other children, or in fact, really with adults, because they were too sensitive and too rigid to have relationships, or to communicate effectively, or to do enjoyable things with other people. We want to help kids out of that. We want to respect their needs and their individuality. We want to respect the fact that they have preferences, but we need to help them expand so that they can have their preferences, but they can still function if they don't get everything exactly the way that they want it. There you have it. That is our discussion on rigidity versus flexibility today in the context of play. I hope that you learned something. I would love it if you would leave a comment, maybe about an area where a child you're working with is very rigid, and maybe some of the rules that exist in that activity, and then maybe one of the rules that you are thinking of bending first, gently. I hope you have a wonderful day. I will see you in the next video. Bye.